Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're focusing on just one really potent account. It's a childhood near-death experience, and we're going to use it to, well, maybe challenge how we think about consciousness itself.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. We're looking at the experience of Chris C. He was only 11 years old, had a very brief NDE, but it seems utterly transformative.
And our mission, really, is to unpack two things that just seem, well, they seem backwards, almost. First, this feeling of absolute effortless perfection he described, and second, his reaction when he came back to life. It's surprising, to say the least.
It really is, and what makes this account particularly useful, I think, is how clear the setup was. This wasn't, a car crash or a long illness.
No, it was intentional, right? That fainting game.
Exactly. An adventurous kid, lunch break at school, they'd learned this stunt. Hyperventilate, restrict blood flow. He was trying it out. Intentionally induced unconsciousness.
He remembers practicing, but not the moment it actually worked. Just blank. Next thing, he's somewhere else. Wakes up later in the school lobby, teacher there. And his friend confirmed the whole blackout was, what, maybe a minute and 40 seconds?
About that, yeah. Which is incredibly short for the kind of profound experience he reports.
Okay, so let's talk about that transition. He said it was sudden?
Immediate.
Yeah.
Complete. And here's the crucial part. When he arrived in this other place, this void, he had zero memory of his earthly life. None at all.
So no sense of relief, like, oh, I escaped pain, because he didn't remember any pain.
Precisely. There was nothing to be relieved from.
Yeah.
Consciousness was just operating without the usual baggage, you could say, without the physical memories attached.
Right. Okay, so this place he arrived in, he didn't describe, like, angels or bright lights?
No, not the typical imagery you sometimes hear, especially from adult NDEs. He called it a soft, warm void. Dark, but sort of faintly glowing. Shaded. Utterly peaceful, comfortable.
It sounds less like a specific heaven and more like a baseline, like returning to some default setting.
That's exactly the impression, a default state. Not some ecstatic peak, but just normal, effortless. He used the word frictionless, which I find really interesting.
Frictionless, explain that.
Well, think about our good feelings here, right? Joy, love, connection. Even those often have an edge. Maybe you fear they'll end, or the effort needed to keep them going, or just the contrast with the bad stuff.
Yeah, okay. There's always some tension.
But in this void, zero tension. He said there was absolutely nothing wrong, nothing bothering him, nothing to do, just pure, effortless balance, a kind of timeless oneness.
Wow. Frictionless existence. But hang on, if he didn't have his body or his memories, how did he know it was him? The same Chris C. telling the story later. Was he sure about that?
That's a really fundamental question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he's adamant. Absolutely adamant. He said the consciousness itself, the meanness, felt completely familiar. It's the exact same awareness that's, living in his body now. Just
detached. Detached from the physical filters. Okay, so no body, no form.
No form. No sensory organs as we know them. No up or down. No gravity.
How did he perceive anything then? How did he see this dark, glowing void?
He called it direct seeing without eyes. It highlights this paradox of NDE consciousness. Perception didn't take effort. No eye muscle straining, no focusing needed.
Which suggests maybe those things needing eyes, needing focus, needing time to process those are limitations imposed by the body.
That seems to be the implication. In the void, perception was just immediate, total, effortless. And time itself just sort of stopped making sense. Because there was no thinking ahead, no sequence of thoughts, just existing in this eternal now.
Okay, that sounds like profound peace. But this is where the story takes a sharp turn, right? Because despite finding this absolute peace, he says his highest level of consciousness wasn't there. It was actually upon re-entry.
It's the core paradox. Why would coming back to the limited, difficult body trigger peak awareness? Seems counterintuitive. But he described that moment of re-entry as giving him a cosmic level of perspective.
Cosmic perspective, meaning?
Meaning he was suddenly, vividly aware of both dimensions at the same time. The effortless, perfect reality he was leaving, and this heavy, burdensome physical reality he was being pulled back into. Side-by-side awareness.
So the body isn't just a limitation, maybe it's also a lens or a point of contrast. That peak awareness came from seeing the difference between the two states.
That's a great way to put it. The void was perfection, but the re-entry offered comprehension, understanding the contrast. He described the return itself as being suddenly sucked back, a literal whooshing feeling.
Whooshing back into the body. Did he see his body from outside?
No, never saw it from outside. It was more like suddenly connecting back to physical memory. And all the files, family, school, problems, everything just flooded in. like a wave.
Okay, the wave hits. All the memories of this life come rushing back. And the very first unfiltered thought was,
Not, wow, I'm alive. Not relief. It was immediate, powerful, and utterly clear. Oh no, not this again.
oh no, not this again. Wow. For an 11-year-old, that's staggering. It just completely flips the script on survival instincts.
It wasn't fear of death he felt upon returning. It was, in a way, dread of life. And that this wasn't just about, homework or a specific bully. It was everything.
All of it. The whole package. Family, friends, future.
The entire experience of being in this world, it all instantly felt tiresome, effortful, difficult, especially compared to that frictionless state he'd just been in.
So returning wasn't like coming home. It was like being handed a massive unwanted job.
He used almost those exact words, like being handed a giant chore that he now had to slog through.
Mm.
And what's really interesting is that Chris Key considers that moment, that feeling of, oh no, to be the most powerful part.
More powerful than the piece of the void. Why?
Because for him, it was the undeniable proof. The proof that consciousness can exist totally separate from this dimension's rules and realities. This life, this world, it isn't a default, it's the work, the effort.
Okay. So if this life is the chore, how did that brief minute and a half experience shape the next 30 years for him? Did it change him overnight?
He says it was more subtle than that. Not an instant enlightenment, but like
Yeah.
it shifted his trajectory. Just by a few degrees. Subconsciously, he thinks, it just devalued all the usual stuff.
Material things, career, that kind of success.
Yeah, because he knew, absolutely knew, that none of it could ever touch that baseline feeling of effortless okayness he found elsewhere. Earthly success just became kind of irrelevant to the bigger picture.
That makes sense. Now, you mentioned he did struggle later on with depression and anxiety starting in his teens. Did he link that back to this feeling of waking up to the chore?
He did see a connection, yes. But he draws a really important distinction. The depression and anxiety, those were struggles within this dimension. Mood changes, energy shifts, the difficulties of navigating this reality, part of the chore itself.
Okay, so struggles within the chore versus the NDE, which was realizing it was a chore.
Exactly. The NDE was about the nature of reality itself, a glimpse outside. The later struggles were about the difficulty inside, a different category of experience entirely.
Got it. And that clarity helps us compare it to other altered states he tried later, right? Which I think is super helpful for people trying to understand NDEs. Let's start with general anesthetic. Any similarities there?
None whatsoever, according to him. Anesthesia was just lights out, off, then on again. No sense of going anywhere, no void, no experience, just unconsciousness.
Okay, so that suggests the NDE wasn't just like the brain shutting down from lack of oxygen or fainting. It was an actual experience happening during that shutdown.
That's how he interprets it, yes. It confirms for him that something else was going on.
All right. What about psychedelics? Psilocybin, magic mushrooms? People often draw parallels there. Did he see any?
Again, he says absolutely not. Fundamentally different. The psilocybin trips were intense, yes, but entirely internal. He described them as altered body states, not out-of-body experiences.
Altered body states, meaning he still felt very much here in this world, just weirdly.
Exactly. Very much in this world, but with perception and emotion warped. Subjective changes. Whereas the NDE felt like accessing objective knowledge, a higher clarity, that external peace.
And crucially, the emotional tone was different too.
Completely different. The NDE was pure peace, enhanced consciousness, total clarity, even upon re-entry with its difficult realization. The psilocybin trips, they could include periods of, quote, extreme terror.
Ah, right. Fear. Confusion. Still bound by the mind's potential for negativity.
Self might dissolve somewhat on psilocybin, but it dissolves within this reality, and that could be terrifying. Trying to reorient. Panic. The NDE felt like knowing an external truth, beyond his ego. The drug trips felt like messing with the ego's internal lens, sometimes breaking it in scary ways.
So NDE felt like going home to truth. Drugs felt like messing with the furniture in your current, sometimes scary room.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. And this difference reinforces his point about the NDE memory itself. He says it's clearer today, decades later, than almost any other childhood memory. Birthdays, holidays, whatever.
Why does he think that is? If the brain was offline.
His conclusion is that the memory can't be stored in the usual way. It must be held in a different medium, as he puts it. Because if the brain wasn't recording neurologically for that minute 40, where did the experience get stored?
Which leads him to believe
I do.
about consciousness.
It leads him to a firm belief in a non-physical aspect of consciousness. Divinity, maybe, other dimensions, some kind of cosmic intelligence. But grounded entirely in this direct observation, this data point, not based on his religious upbringing, which was pretty generalized anyway, but on what he directly experienced, like a scientific finding for him.
It's really quite a story, just from that 1 minute and 40 seconds at age 11, a complete paradigm shift. So boiling it all down, what's the key takeaway here for you listening, for the learner?
I think the core insight is perspective, realizing the sheer effort involved in just being here. Chris Key got this incredibly stark view that this life, with all its striving, its goals, its ups and downs, is just one possible and, frankly, difficult thing our consciousness can do.
It's not the default state.
It's not the default. And that no earthly success, no amount of money or friends or achievements can ever replicate that feeling of effortless okayness that seems to be the actual baseline in that other dimension. We're living the exception, maybe. The effortful version.
Which leaves us with that really provocative question he's apparently spent 30 years pondering. If absolute effortless peace and perfection is the baseline, the true normal for consciousness, and coming back here felt like being handed this giant chore, then what is the point of this dimension?
Right. If the goal isn't peace, because that's where consciousness comes from, what is the purpose of choosing or experiencing this difficult, effortful reality? What's the goal of the chore?
Something to definitely chew on. What is the goal of the chore, indeed? We'll leave you with that until our next deep dive.
Thank you for listening to Borrowed Time NDE podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss a moment of inspiration. Until next time, wishing you an extraordinary and truly wonderful time on your journey through life.